Colligative properties are essentially defined as a property of a solution that depends only on the number of particles dissolved in the solution, not the solution's identity. So there are some things about solutions that are unique over and over and over, well, not that are common, depending on how much stuff is dissolved in the solution versus how much stuff is not dissolved in the solution. So the first question that I'd like to kind of talk about to sort of address this situation is, why do we use road salt like last night on the roads in wintertime? So I've heard a couple things. The first thing I heard was melts the ice. Second thing that I heard was it absorbs the water. Is that what you said? Okay. And the issue is that we know that ice, for example, is solid water, right? And according to science, ice will freeze ice's freezing point is 0 degrees Celsius. Yes? Okay, now, when we add salt, like road salt is usually like magnesium chloride or calcium chloride, but like when we did the lab yesterday, we used actual table salt. When we use table salt, so if I'm going to incorporate table salt, so I'm just going to use it as one thing here for the sake of this argument, what ends up happening is that the table salt particles actually end up dissolving into the ice. And as a result of that, what ends up happening is that essentially water has a difficult time forming a solid when it's got other particles dissolved in it. And the reason for that is because the ions from the salt get in the way of the intermolecular forces of attraction between the polar water molecules. So that might look something like this. Nope, that's not what I wanted. So if we had something like this, and I'm only using one box here just to kind of illustrate it, I can make some solid, but the problem is that, like I said, my salt particles are kind of getting in the way, and as a result of them getting in the way, what ends up happening is they're disrupting the intermolecular forces. So the way that we would probably describe that is that water can't form a solid as easily because the salts ions disrupt the intermolecular forces of attraction between the polar water molecule. Okay, so water sticks together because of the because it's a hydrogen bonding, but it's also a polar molecule, and so the intermolecular forces of attraction get disrupted when we add a little bit of salt. And as a result of that, when you add salt, like for example on the road, we change the freezing point of water from 0 degrees Celsius, which is pure water, to the freezing point of the solution. So we now have a new freezing point. And the freezing point of the solution, I'm just going to guess, might be something like negative 15 degrees Celsius. So like yesterday, I told you to add salt and then stir, and you had to make sure that your ice bath that you had was somewhere around negative 10, right? So what I'm trying to get at here is that by adding salt, we essentially are lowering the freezing point of water. And as a result of lowering the freezing point of water on the roads, what ends up happening is that the salt then, this saltwater solution requires an incredibly incredibly lower temperature to become ice and makes the road safer to drive on. Does that make sense? So we call that freezing point depression. Now, freezing point depression is the freezing point of a solution is always lower than the freezing point of the pure solvent. Okay, and so what's happening here is that, like we just said, is that the dissolved particles are disrupting, can spell, the intermolecular forces of attraction of the pure solvent. And as a result of that, the freezing point lowers. Now, according to the box of the macaroni and cheese, it says to bring water to a boil and then dump the unboiled noodles into the water. And as a result of dumping the unboiled noodles into the water, you should cook the noodles. But then it says optionally to add like a pinch of salt. Why? That's a good guess, but I promise to you, adding salt to boiling water, to boiling noodles, does not enhance the flavor. What? That is also another common misconception. Hannah said that it boils faster. Here's the thing. Wait. Here's the thing. Adding salt, hint, hint, wink, wink, nudge, nudge, raises the boiling point. And let me explain why that's important. So what happens is that by getting the water to a hotter temperature before it boils will essentially make the noodles cook faster. So we raise the boiling point of water by dissolving salt in it when we're making the macaroni and cheese. And we are now boiling, instead of at 100 degrees Celsius, we're maybe boiling at like 110 degrees Celsius, which means the water molecules have more energy, and as a result of that, they're able to cook the noodles faster. Does that make sense? Pardon? Right, no, I understand that. I understand that you can do it. That's why it's an optional thing. What I'm saying is that that's why that's why people will add salt to boiling water in an effort to cook noodles. So, I believe you that you are a lazy sack and you make your mom make you sandwiches and stuff like that.
You're saying when you were 16, you would take the opportunity if your mom was going to make you a sandwich?
Well, the funny story about that is if I was to say things like, hey, Ma, I'm hungry, you want to make me something, she would actually tell me no, and I would have to make it myself.
Why do you assume we're so rude? I never say that to my mom. She would usually ask me if I'm hungry, and I say yes. She would say, oh, I can make you something.
Well, I'm just saying.
I'm just saying.
Now.
Generation is soft.
Yeah, right, okay. Now, what?
Your moms didn't love you.
That's possible. All right, now, here's the thing.
Oh, maybe they just love his Lord because he learned how to have life skills.
Life skills, yeah, then I don't have to teach you guys life skills. Like, there's an actual class that my wife is teaching next year, and one of the actual units is called adulting. She is going to teach kids to be adults.
Like what?
That's dumb. I want to be young forever.
Well, to be honest with you, I think you might disagree, because it's actually certain life skills that are helpful to you in terms of like being a successful human being.
Like what?
Now, like it helps things like with taxes or like with what?
Then I would take it.
Right, and that's what it's essentially teaching you some life skills like debt management and like getting a loan.
Social with other people.
What?
Did you teach you how to be social with other people?
There are other things associated with it, yeah. Now, anyway, moving on. We need to talk lastly about boiling point elevation. So in this case, boiling point elevation of a solution is always going to be higher than the freezing point of the pure solvent. Now, the reason for that, again, has to do with the dissolved particles. The dissolved particles are attracted to the solvent particles via intermolecular forces, and as a result, more energy is required to overcome those forces for the phase change. Does that make sense? Based on what we just talked about. Okay. All right.